I won't lie to you, I'd never heard of Another Code, its Wii sequel, or trace memory before the reveal of its remake in September of last year. I didn't understand the importance of this collection to a lot of people, but I saw its beautiful art style, and as a fan of adventure games, I knew I needed to check it out at release. A demo came out in December, and it honestly wasn't doing anything for me. It was a slow burn and it had some questionable performances, but I was willing to wait and give the full game a chance when it released last week. I'm glad I did. Another Code Recollection is a solid adventure game, and a perfect entry point for newcomers into the genre. It blends visual novel storytelling with exploration and puzzle solving to create a rather engaging experience. It's not without its issues though, as rough pacing, unresponsive controls, and a few lackluster performances led me to having initial teething issues with the first half of the package. Is it worth overcoming these issues though to see what the entirety of the game has to offer? Well, let's start with the game's strongest suit, its story. Another Code Recollection is the pairing of both games in the series, two memories and a journey into lost memories, into one complete package. Unlike other remake collections in the past, Another Code does not separate the two games on the menu, instead weaving both of them into one single storyline played back to back. In the first, Two Memories, main protagonist Ashley Mizuki Robbins is 13 years old, who on the eve of her 14th birthday has travelled to Blood Edward Island to reunite with her father, who she has presumed to be dead for the past 10 years. While exploring the island, she meets the ghost of a young boy named Dee, and the pair work together to bring back Dee's memories and reunite Ashley with her missing father. The story is rather basic, and the scope and stakes of this first entry are a lot smaller in comparison to Ashley's second adventure. This first adventure is also where a majority of the pacing and character performance issues take place. The first story in this collection is only around 4 to 5 hours long in total, yet the story seems to crawl for the first two chapters. It may be due to the majority of the game taking place in a single mansion, but the drip feed of narrative beats throughout these first few hours is honestly rather painful, with any plot twists or story beats being obvious to those that have played any game in the genre before. As for performances, I feel like Ashley's performance starts out slightly wooden, but she quickly improves in quality as the collection goes on. The same can't be said for a supporting cast in the first entry, as most are adequate at best and comical at worst. They are nothing that will take you out of the story, especially if you've played a Japanese visual novel before, and thankfully, most of these issues are completely gone with the second entry, which is the stronger part in almost every aspect. The second entry, A Journey into Lost Memories, takes place over 2 years later, with Ashley now 16 and heading to Lake Juliet to go on a camping trip with her father. In the process, her bag is stolen by a boy, and a mystery revolving around the area, its inhabitants, and her father's workspace, JC Valley, begins to unravel. The second entry instantly gave me Life is Strange vibes, with Ashley wanting to be a musician, a continued supernatural tone from the first entry, and the game having a much larger cast of characters when compared to the first. It's also the entry where the performances and narrative really start to shine. The second game is nearly double the length of the first, taking me around 8 to 9 hours to beat solely when focusing on the main path. Where this second entry differs the most is its pacing. Journey onto Lost Memories provides you with a whole area to explore, filled with people and locations to interact with. What's great is, despite this larger story and scope, the pacing feels so much better than its predecessor. Every chapter feels like it's adding something to the mystery, and although the overall story is basic, the characters and performances are really allowed to shine. Ashley is a highlight at this point, and her interactions with her father and the rest of the cast made me really care for them by the time I reached credits. It's honestly quite surprising how much higher quality the second game feels in comparison to the first, and despite the first game still having some great story moments, I honestly see the sequel as the main reason to pick up this collection. Despite the stark contrast in setting and narrative between the two games, one thing Arc System Works has nailed is reimagining the gameplay of both games into one consistent style. Instead of the point-and-click style of the original games, both games have been reimagined as modern adventure games with puzzle-solving elements. This new style involves exploring 3D spaces and solving various puzzles within its environment to progress the story. The spaces differ greatly in size, with the first game using its smaller environments to give puzzles over the entirety of the mansion, to the second game having vast areas with each being a focal point at a different point in the story. All these environments are really well realised, and I never struggled to find where the game wanted me to go next. As for the game's many puzzles, these range from simple logic puzzles to collecting and using equipment found throughout the environment, to using the DAS to take photos and using those in various ways. These puzzles get more complex as the game goes on, and despite a few terrible uses of motion control, I found most of them to be enjoyable and the control schemes intuitive. If you ever get lost or stuck, there are a variety of tools to help you on your journey. The game can supply you with hints that can be toggled in the settings, which have multiple steps of help that range from a small push to solving the puzzle entirely. The game also has a compass that can be toggled from the menu that surrounds Ashley and points her in the right direction. I personally found this one to be a bit too distracting and found it to point to puzzle solutions before I even realised there was a puzzle. I personally kept all these features off, but it's a nice addition for anybody in need of additional help, and can thankfully be toggled off and on at any point in the game. Apart from the occasional puzzle and its world exploration, the rest of Another Code's gameplay is found in its visual novel elements. These sections are nicely animated and have some great camera work, but other than the ability to choose what order topics are brought up in conversation, and the occasional multiple choice that gives you added flavour to Ashley's personality, these are all fairly linear. I should also note that there is no fast forward option for dialogue, and some puzzle solutions do change between playthroughs, which might make replaying the game a tad more tedious if you just want to explore and see what the world has to offer. I doubt many of you are looking for replay value from this game, but it's always good to know. Another Code Recollection is a visually stunning game. From character models to overall world design, it's all just a joy to take in. The game manages to blend its exploration and puzzle elements with in-environment visual novel elements, and they all look fantastic. Characters pop from the background, and bar a few jarring walking animations, everything looks excellent. The same goes for the as mentioned before character performances, which, bar a few rough patches in the first game, are all fantastic. The only issue I have with the presentation is the over-reliance of image flashbacks, which usually consist of drawings and voiceover. There's nothing wrong with these in theory, but the overuse of them does tend to wear on you by the end of the second game. This is all complemented by an excellent soundtrack that really sets the tone of both experiences. The first game balances its eerie atmosphere perfectly, and the second game's more expanded, relaxed soundtrack makes for a great accompaniment to the game's rural setting and tone. From emotional pieces to goofy theme songs, there's plenty to love from the game's soundtrack, and I encourage you to give it a listen, even if you don't end up picking the game. At the end of the day, Another Code Recollection is a solid package of two cult classic stories completely remade for a modern audience. The second game is certainly stronger than the first, both in terms of length and in overall quality, but if you can get over the first rough hour or two of the original game, there's still plenty to love in both of these games. Its pacing is a tad sloppy, its performances may be hit and miss, but its charming world, story and characters made me understand why this series is so beloved by fans of the genre. If you're a fan of adventure games or its modern day equivalents like Life is Strange, I can't help but recommend you give Another Code Recollection a chance. It certainly isn't a master of the genre, and its simplistic dialogue and overuse of flashbacks may start to irk you by the time you reach its conclusion, but its likeable cast and interesting narrative come together in a game that should easily scratch that adventure game itch. I honestly have to give props to Nintendo for allowing such a beautifully crafted remake of two very obscure adventure games to be made in the first place. No other large publisher would give a series like this another chance, and to see it handled so respectively is just an awesome thing to see. This also extends to the team at Arc System Works for not only creating a faithful remake, but changing both narrative and gameplay elements to better suit the melding of these two different games to make one cohesive adventure. I doubt we'll see Ashley Mizuki Robbins again, but the fact we got an excellent definitive edition for both of these stories is something I'm sure old and new fans will cherish forever.